My mother slammed my autistic brother's face into his dinner plate for staring at her key. When I begged her to stop, she screamed, "You want it? You think you deserve to look at what's mine? I just found out what that key was for. I regret being curious." My mother wore a brass key around her neck that would one day save our lives. But first, it nearly killed us. She never took it off, not in the shower, not in bed. The leather cord had left a permanent mark on her skin from 13 years of never coming off. Growing up, we had one rule that mattered above all others: nobody touches the key. When I was 6, I asked what it opened. She held my hand over the stove burner until the skin blistered and peeled. After that, I learned to look away when she leaned down. But Charlie was 8 and had autism. He couldn't remember rules like that. She caught him staring at it during dinner. His eyes followed it as it swung forward when she reached for the salt. I saw her face change. She grabbed his jaw and slammed his face into the dinner table. The crack echoed through the kitchen. Blood splattered across his mac and cheese as she did it again. "You want it?" she screamed. "You think you deserve to look at what's mine?" The emergency room doctor bought her bike accident story. They always did. Charlie came home with his jaw wired shut, and she made him write lines with his broken fingers. The punishments in our house were specific: hot spoons pressed into our arms for talking back, bleach in the bathwater for impure thoughts, standing in the corner on one foot for 6 hours if you breathed too loud. She'd touch that key before each session, as if asking permission. By the time I turned 14, I'd mapped every lock in our house. The key didn't fit any of them, not the basement door, not her jewelry box, not the filing cabinet. Charlie thought it belonged to a safety deposit box. I thought maybe it was from her childhood home. We whispered theories at night when the house was quiet. The torture got worse as we got older. She'd make us kneel on rice for hours, shove bars of soap in our mouths until we threw up, lock us in the basement freezer for 30-second intervals, just enough to hurt, but not enough to cause notice. She was smart like that. One night, she kept Charlie awake for 72 hours straight by spraying him with ice water every time his eyes closed. I listened to him sob through the walls while she laughed. Something in me snapped. We had to get out or we'd die there. That's when I started really planning. I got a job at McDonald's and hid cash in a tampon box under my bed. I researched youth shelters in other states, but minimum wage wasn't enough for 2 bus tickets, food, and a place to stay. We needed more money. I found the floorboard by accident. She was at her Wednesday church meeting, and I was stealing her sleeping pills to help Charlie rest. My foot hit a loose board in her closet. Underneath was a keyhole. She always knew everything. I woke up zip-tied in the basement. 1 week down there with nothing but water and stale bread. When she finally let me out, she was smiling. "Curiosity is a waste of time," she said. Remember that? 6 months later, she told us Charlie was too damaged to keep, said she'd found a special facility upstate that could fix him. I knew there was no facility. I'd heard her on the phone asking about unmarked graves. That's when I put my plan into action. Every Friday, she drank herself stupid after hurting us. I'd been stealing her Ambien for months and grinding it into powder. That Friday, I put 20 pills in her vodka bottle. She took forever to pass out. I sat on the stairs, counting her breaths until they got deep and regular. The key had fallen forward on its cord. I lifted it off her neck so slowly it took 5 full minutes. Charlie kept watch while I ran to her room. The floorboard came up easily. I turned the key and heard the lock click open. Inside was $30,000 in cash. Our birth certificates with different names: Adam and James Henley, not Charlie and Ryan O'Reilly. Our real parents' death certificates. Police photos of a car accident. 2 bodies in the front seats. At the bottom was adoption paperwork never filed and our father's service weapon, a Glock 19 with a full clip. She wasn't our mother. She was our father's sister. She'd killed them both and taken us, along with 9 years of survivor benefits that were meant for us. I stared at the gun for a long time. Part of me wanted to use it to end her like she ended them, but we weren't like her. I took the money and our real documents, left the gun and evidence for whoever found it, and caught a Greyhound to Seattle at 3:00 a.m. We never heard from her again until a month later, when there was a knock at the door. It wasn't my mother, it was the police. She'd used the gun on herself, blown her brains out, and left a note saying her sufferings were all our fault. The officer stood in our doorway holding official paperwork with names I hadn't heard in 13 years. Adam and James Henley. Charlie rocked in the corner of our small Seattle apartment, sensing danger the way he always did. His fingers tapped against his thigh in the pattern that meant he was scared. The taller officer cleared his throat and explained about the woman's suicide note. Charlie started humming our real mother's lullaby, the one from before everything went wrong, and I panicked. She actually found our birth certificates, I blurted out. The officers exchanged glances. What else might be hidden? Our neighbor across the hall emerged, frantic about a break-in at her apartment. The officers looked between us and her, and I had to choose: help her and seem like good citizens, or stay silent and look suspicious. Charlie whispered from his corner, barely audible, "She's watching." But the shorter officer was already unfolding the suicide note. He read it aloud in a flat, professional voice, and Charlie melted down, banging his head and screaming. The officer called for backup and social services. 3 problems crashed down at once. Charlie needed his medication refill, the prescription was under our fake names, the police wanted to question us, and our landlord appeared over noise complaints. I pulled out our lease to prove we were legitimate tenants, but it showed our fake names. The officer's sympathy faded as he compared the lease to his paperwork. I admitted we were using false names, but explaining why without sounding delusional seemed impossible. How could I tell them about the abuse and torture without proof? Charlie recited our real birthdays and social security numbers, but the officers thought I'd coached him. Then I spotted it in the officer's evidence bag. Our mother's wedding ring. Through the plastic, I could read the inscription. My blood ran cold. The officers decided to separate us for questioning. Charlie screamed about the key as they guided him away. The brass key that had defined our childhood was now evidence in her death. Within an hour, a tired social worker arrived. She asked for our medical records, but I had to explain that the woman had destroyed everything from before we were 6. Only the fake name records remained. 13 years of detailed documentation of injuries and lies. To her, my desperate truth sounded like the ravings of a disturbed young man who'd drugged his mother and stolen from her. The woman's Facebook memorial page filled with posts: loving mother, devoted caregiver, our absence noted as heartless. I tried to show photos and recordings I'd kept, but the detective flagged them as obsessive documentation. My survival evidence became proof of premeditation. Then came the will, dated 2 years before her suicide. It named us beneficiaries, but only if we completed reconciliation therapy with her friend, the therapist who'd twisted my every word. I hadn't slept in 7 tight hours. When I tried to explain her death timeline, I stumbled. A custody battle began. The woman's brother, uncle, we called him, claimed guardianship of Charlie. The system that should have protected us became another weapon. I gathered what evidence I could: emails, photos, recordings, our father's journal, and finally a cassette tape hidden in his military footlocker. On it, our father's voice and our aunt's calm, methodical threats. Enough to expose her delusion. At the final hearing, the judge unsealed the therapist's records. Years of documented delusional disorder. The courtroom fell silent. Tears streamed down my uncle's face as his belief crumbled. When the judge asked if I wanted my uncle prosecuted, I surprised everyone. Charlie needs family, even broken family, I said. He doesn't need vengeance. The judge granted me custody, with my uncle to have supervised visitation after treatment. Our survivor benefits were restored at last. 6 months later, Charlie and I stood at our parents' real graves. He held the brass key and placed it between the stones. It opens the truth now, he said softly. The tarnished key that once locked